Hey everyone, today we're going to go through the process of taking your CityEngine 3D models into augmented reality using Unity and Google ARCore on Android devices. So this process will allow shareholders, stakeholders, and even your team to be able to visualize different design scenarios modeled in CityEngine within augmented reality on Android phones. The interactive template will allow anybody to load these scenes in and be able to switch between these different scenarios and collaborate in 3D. So to begin with, any of the following Android devices are supported, and you can look this up on the Google developer page for supported devices. So as long as you have one of these, you're ready to go. And so we're using Unity. It's good to understand licensing. So if you're going to be using this for any professional use, you need to be using the Plus or the professional licensing. If you're just using it to learn, to test with, you can download the personal version. And I really recommend using Unity Hub to really start to manage your Unity installs and all of your projects. So go ahead and go there and download Unity Hub. This is what Unity Hub looks like. You can click on your installed versions, or you can install other official releases. Let's say we want to download the most recent, which I've already downloaded. And on the right side, you can choose additional components. Make sure that you add the Android build support component when you install. And then the next thing we want to do is create a new project. And we're going to call this whatever you want. This could be my CityEngine Augmented Reality app. It could be my project. You name it. Create the project. And it's going to import a lot of assets and just give you your base packages for your scene. So we're not going to do anything with this existing scene. We're actually going to delete it. But to start with, we want to go and download the CityEngine ARCore assets package information off of the GitHub page. Either download the most recent GitHub push or the latest template that we've published up to box. So you can go there and download it. And you can either drag and drop those files into Unity from GitHub, or you can go through the process of installing and downloading that package. So import package, custom package, find the one you've just downloaded, and it's that CityEngine AR one, for instance. And it's going to decompress, load that up, and get it all plugged into Unity. So here's some examples of what that package contains. So we basically have loaded the project into what's called Google's ARCore. So we need all of this stuff, everything that's checked, we're going to bring in, and even the Play Services resolver. So once that's done, we're just going to get rid of the scenes folder. Go and just delete it. We don't need that. We're actually storing our scenes under the examples folder. And we have a predefined template you can modify and replace even here. And that's, we'll go into that in a minute. So first of all, this is the viewer. And this is where the magic happens. So right now you can see it's still set to Windows machines. So we need to change the build settings to support Android devices and switch the platform. We can do that under build settings. Next thing we want to do is then visualize some of the different layouts for different Android devices. And this will be useful when we're starting to test the app before we build it into an actual app for the Android phone. So what we need to do, first of all, before we move forward, is to go to our CityEngine project, and we want to, first of all, make a project that has our existing conditions model, models separated out in one scenario for demolition, so the buildings are separate, separate buildings for each design scenario as well. And you can use the CityEngine scenarios to make that happen. Kind of flip through those again for a second. So let's turn off scenario 4. I just want the existing conditions without the buildings that are going to be demolished. And this is our main base map that everything else sits on. We need this for context. So what we want to do is we want to create some folders to store these models in for each scenario and the existing conditions of the demolition. So I'm going to create one called existing conditions. I'm going to create a folder called demolition, create a folder called scenario 1, one for scenario 2, and one for scenario 3. I apologize for the repetitive work. We're hoping to have the ability to do scripts in the future that can automate this piece. Okay, so we have our folder schema created. So now let's press Ctrl-A on the main viewport, and either press Ctrl-E for export or go to File and then Export. And wrong exporter, I do that all the time too. Export models is what you're looking for, and we're going to choose Autodesk FBX. Now let's just go and browse and navigate to our folder that the project's in, select existing conditions, and then we're going to name the actual FBX file as existing conditions. And we want to select to center the model because we need to take it to the origin, so that'll make it the center of it at 0, 0, 0 coordinate. The game engines will like that a lot better. And the next step is to export the terrain layers. And this is the only layer we're going to export terrain on because it's just for the main base map that everything sits on. And then we're going to click Finish. So that's the first step. Next step, we want to go and just select our demolition buildings. And yes, the base map does still show up on this. That's not to worry. We'll walk through how you can turn that off. So press Ctrl-A again. Export a FBX file using Ctrl-E or export models under the file options. You want to go in here and select Do Not Export Any Terrain Layers. And this is for all the rest of the models. Now don't change any parameters here for the global offset. We're going to keep those as is because we want it to be in context to the original base map model that we've just exported. And we're going to call this demolition. And I mean, we just, instead of browsing from the folder, we just rename that demolition, for instance. You can always browse. The next one we want to do, turn off the main models again. They like to flick back on. We're going to press Ctrl-A, Ctrl-E for file export, and we're going to name this Scenario 1, and then Scenario 1 as well. Keep everything else the same. It should be retained from the last demolition model, and go that route. And we're going to do the same thing for Scenario 2 and Scenario 3, numbered as 2 or 3 and 4 up above. Control-E. Just change the 2. That's a faster approach than browsing again. And then finish. It's going to put them into the Scenario 2 folder. And lastly, for Scenario 3. And these are just some really quick urban designs that you're seeing here today. They're nothing really special. We just kind of put these together very quickly for this demo. Okay, so now you have all of the models exported into their appropriate folders. We're going to copy and paste those folders into the Unity engine in place of the example that you have available. So that's how you would take your own project in place. So we're going to walk through those next steps here. Okay, so by default, you saw where the initial scene was. Well, you can see under Models folder, I've actually had those folders already there with those FBX files. You could actually replace all of those and delete that example. But this is an example showing you how you need to place the models in their right hierarchy. And we're going to walk through this process as well. So to start with, let's go in here, and I'm just going to delete these scenes. We're going to recreate it from the folders, so this will look the same as if you brought a whole new design scenario in. We're going to create a scene, and we're going to name this CityEngine Models. It doesn't matter what you call it, keep it. CityEngine Models is fine. And don't go into the folders yet. You can see the FBX files, just like you saw in CityEngine, are now all loaded in those folders too as well. So let's get rid of the main camera. That's the first step in that scene because we no longer need it. And let's take our demolition model and load it in. And just rename that to just demolition. Keep it simple. Because those names will roll over into the actual project. The next thing you want to do is drag your existing conditions model in. And you can put this above the demolition model also in the hierarchy. And then we're going to dig through a little bit more of these folders. We want to take and load the 3 scenarios in one at a time. And just check the naming. You can always put a space between scenario space 1 if you want. Okay. Scenario 2. And lastly, scenario 3. Yes, perfect. Okay, so all of those have been loaded up. So we also now have to create what's called a prefab. So in order to do that, we need to plug all of these into a empty gameobject container because we can't just drag the scene into that. So this is how you go about doing that. So now they're all grouped into one container. And the prefab will now allow us to drag in that CityEngine Models container that you're seeing there. So let's go and create a prefab. We're going to call this one Existing Conditions or CityEngine Models. You can name it whatever you want. But it's key that you keep the scenarios within that prefab that are in the scene up there, the exact names that you want them to be displayed as in the app. Okay, cool. So now we've just created a prefab and we've dragged the files into the prefab. And that's what the game engine is going to load in augmented reality. All right, that's all there is to that. You can save that file, so you can go back to it later and edit it. And then you would switch out the file in the prefab if you needed to make any changes. So we've loaded back up under our scenes, the CityEngine project, and now we're going to take and in the inspector add that CityEngine Models main model file there, and then inside of that we're going to select the respective nested prefabs or the components that make up each scenario. Now, we've hard-coded this application to require 3 different scenarios, but if you really only have one scenario, you can just drag that same scenario, scenario 1, in there in all the other option locations. Okay, so we have our 3 scenarios, our demolition model in there, and our existing models prefab loaded into the inspector. So next up, we want to go in here and begin to set our preferences to make sure that we have everything installed that we need in Unity to be successful. So to begin with, you need to have the Android SDK installed. You can browse for it, or you can download it right here all inside of Unity. You can also browse and download the Java NDK, or the JDK, the Android JDK. Also, make sure your editor attached is checked and choose your IDE editor you want to use. And then one additional item to be aware of when you do install the Android Studio, you need to go ahead and open it up and make sure that you have the Android 7.0 installation run. Again, you can go to in Android Studio. Over here we see this blue arrow and have it install this right here, the SDK platform. Then you should be good to go. It's up there if you are going to be editing any code, which you may not be. Under your project settings, you want to go in here and go to the editor options. And you want to choose device and choose any Android device to make sure that your device can be used to debug and test here in the project. And then you're going to go into the settings for the ARCore project settings. This is going to allow us to use what's called cloud anchors. That it basically, as we scan the phone around a room, it looks and sees what points are visible of distinct features, and this helps us to align this for immersive experiences we can share with other people. So we're going to create an API key for our cloud anchors on the Google Cloud Platform. We're going to copy that API key, and that's what we're going to use here for this project. And you can always just give it a name. I like to keep myself organized myself. And there's no restrictions necessary for now on this one. You can always change this later. Okay, so plug in your API key, click close, and then you can always go through and save that file, save project, save scene. So the next thing you want to do is set up instant preview on your iPhone. So you need to go and go through the process of how you do this. You need to enable developer options on your phone if you want to debug or to preview your models before you export those. I really highly recommend this if you're going to be creating a lot of different models. And you want to then install some other components. We're going to go through those right now. So you need to have the ARCore app installed on your device, and then install the ARCore Instant Preview, as you see here. And with the two of those, you're going to be able to use your phone to demo within the application. Now, the last step we want to do is we're going to go to Build and Run. And again, your Android device should be the default. But we want to choose our phone or all compatible devices, which sometimes works too for your device, to make sure that your device is connected. So just plug your phone into your machine, let it load for a minute. It's going to ask permissions to access the folders on your machine, and there you go. And then the inspector is also very important. Before you export your game, you need to make sure you have a few things set up, like your package name. So for your project, you want to have your com and then company. So this would be like your company name. Let's say that I'm at Esri, and the name of the application is going to be CityEngine AR, for instance. I want to then go in here and choose a few other things. Make sure my Android's set to Android 7, which is fine. But then you should be good to go. So let's give this a demo. So I'm going to click play. And then we can change the model elevation. So we've added these options here. So we can say, let's put it 2.2 meters up, or 2.2 meters from the true base of the geometry in the Z space. And then we can also change the scaling factor too. And this allows us to view and test our model before we export it. So we've made the model a little bit smaller now, for instance. Or larger. And you test to make sure the scenarios load. Okay, so that's all you have to do as far as testing goes. And the last thing you need to do is, once you've tested it and everything looks fine, you're ready to build it, go and select build and run, or build. And you'll be able to use the app.